What's going on, everybody? C4 here, and welcome back to today's video as we continue our fallout of content from the 2019 NFL Draft. Yesterday, we did our draft grades for the AFC and NFC. If you haven't seen that, go do so right now. But I feel like it's time to get a little bit bold. Time to stick our neck out on the line a little bit, and we're going to go through each individual team, and I'm going to give you the best and worst player that they selected in each one of those drafts. Now, this is not necessarily a reflection of talent. It could be of value, necessarily if it was a reach, or maybe they got a tremendous value later rounds to steal. And we're going to try to stick our neck on the line, and we'll see. You know, some of these guys might end up having really, really good seasons, and I'll look like a smartass. Other players might have unreal years, like my adopted son, Darius Leonard, might look like a little bit of a dumbass. So it's all about sticking your neck on the line. It's a little bit of fun here, and it's always great to come back and reflect. We did this last year. It looked pretty good. So maybe this year, I might get the pie on the face, you know what I'm saying, as we go through these players. So we're going to start right away in the AFC. We're going to start with the AFC East with the Miami Dolphins. And the best pick for the Miami Dolphins wasn't actually really a pick. It was trading the 62nd overall pick, a 2025th, for Josh Rosen. They got the best quarterback I think they've had since I've been watching football. And that was a huge gift for Miami. And pretty much everyone that's not a Patriot fan outside looking into the AFC East wants the Dolphins, Bills, and Jets to start doing good, so it's not an absolute cakewalk for the Patriots to get in the playoffs every year, and the Dolphins making a move for Josh Rosen is going to best help them accomplish that. The worst pick is Chandler Cox, who they selected in the 7th round of pick 19. Obviously, we're stretching her a little bit when we start going to, late day 3 picks, which you'll see through a couple teams. As more so, some of these teams just didn't really have bad picks. They all got pretty decent value, some nice playmakers. So if I never heard of them, if they weren't on, my 400-player scout sheet, I'm going to just go with the, pleading ignorance and say that was probably a pretty average pick. Considering some of the guys, some of the big names that slipped undrafted free agency, getting Chandler Cox could do better, Miami. Look at the New England Patriots. Their best value pick for me is Yodny Kajust in the 3rd round, the tackle from West Virginia. I think if he didn't have the quad injury through a lot of the regular season of college football, all that stuff, the offseason, Senior Bowl, Combine. I think if Yodny Kajust didn't have the leg injury, probably would have been early 2nd round pick. Getting that in the 3rd round, he's already going to be a guy that, Scarnecchia is going to develop, and probably in some way, shape, or form in 3 to 4 years is probably going to retract the Patriots another 3rd round comp pick because he's going to go off and get paid big money in free agency. Worst pick for the New England Patriots was Byron Cowart in the 5th round. He's kind of been a bust. Started at Auburn, was a really, really high school recruit. Thought that was just a little bit of a reach here for the New England Patriots. Looking at the New York Jets, their best pick for him was Jachai Polite in the 3rd round. Legitimate 1st-round talent, but absolutely tanked his stock in the offseason. Coming in a little bit heavy. Didn't look good in the combine. Supposedly tanked his interviews. But I'm trusting you right now as a Gator fan. He is a legit 1st-round talent. And the fact that the Jets, who desperately needed an outside linebacker for their 3-4 scheme, a guy like Jachai Polite in the 3rd round, I think is going to come in and earn that starting gig sooner than later. Worst pick for the Jets is Chuma Edoga in the 3rd round. Thought he's a little bit of an overrated. He's a project-type tackle coming from an overrated program. 3rd round's a little too rich for my blood. And finishing up with the Buffalo Bills, Ed Oliver at pick 9 in the 1st round is the best pick. They got the best player in the draft at pick number 9. They didn't have to trade up for him. He was right there sitting for the taking, and I love that move for the team that has been my official dark horse since 3 or 4 months ago. The worst pick, there wasn't really any bad picks, so I had to kind of just stretch a little bit and say Devin Singletary in the 3rd round, just considering how bad his combine was. I mean, his tape is really, really good. Looks like goddamn LaShawn McCoy 2.0 to an extent. He's that damn elusive in the open field. But given the fact that his stock was definitely trending down out of the combine, 3rd round is roughly where I thought he still could go if he had a great combine. So I'm just going to say maybe, overreach slightly. But again, no real bad picks here for the Buffalo Bills. And if I had to just nitpick, it would be Devin Singletary. But I think long-term, the fit in that running back room, it's a really good one. Moving on to the AFC North, we have the Pittsburgh Steelers, and their best value pick for me is Isaiah Buggs, defensive lineman from Alabama. They got him in the 6th round, had a lot of production. He's just a guy that has inconsistencies with his motor. I think if you could tap into that, develop that, that's a great fit for that Steelers defensive line. And the worst pick is Deontay Johnson, 3rd round wide receiver out of Toledo. Way too big of a reach. Johnson is an intriguing prospect, but I have more so had a midday 3 grade on him. In fact, they got him in 3rd round. It's just your classic Steelers reach. Looking at the Cleveland Browns, their best pick is Greedy Williams in the 2nd round. How are they getting the best corner in the draft in the 2nd round? I think the prospect of Greedy Williams and Denzel Ward playing the same secondary is incredibly enticing. That's a great get for now the AFC North favorites in the Cleveland Browns. And the worst pick is Austin Seibert. They got the kicker from Oklahoma in the 5th round. Thought that was a reach. I didn't even think he's that great of a kicker. Did not look good at the Senior Bowl, so a little bit of a head scratcher there. Moving to the Baltimore Ravens, their best pick for me, Justice Hill in the 4th round. I think, looking at 2020, if you're kind of feeling that maybe Mark Ingram's like a 1-year rental, a guy like Justice Hill has all the upside to develop into maybe the Baltimore Ravens lead back. I thought that's exceptional value in the 4th round for a very good athlete who's underrated in pass protection. Worst pick, I would say, is Iman Marshall. They selected him in the 4th round. I actually thought he's a kind of intriguing prospect. Hasn't really ever hit full term development. I would like to think at USC, I think he still has his best football ahead of him. Just 4th round's a little too much of a reach for me. Disagree with the value there. Also, you could take, Trace McSorley in the 6th round. A lot of people are surprised he got drafted, but I think with what the Saints have done with Taysom Hill, that's been what the Baltimore Ravens are viewing with McSorley, so he's an honorable mention for the worst pick, but I kind of can justify it. But ultimately, even going with Iman Marshall, I like the player, and the Baltimore Ravens had a really solid draft. Finishing up with the Cincinnati Bengals, the best pick for me was Rodney Anderson in the 6th round out of Oklahoma. If he didn't have the injury issues, I think he could be debatably the top running back in this year's draft class. Now you pair him with Joe Mixon, you got a goddamn Oklahoma Sooner backfield there. They also got Travion Williams from Texas A&M. Really good draft from the Cincinnati Bengals. The worst pick easily is Drew Sample in the 2nd round, the tight end from Washington. I don't think he's a bad tight end, but I definitely had a late day 3 grade on him, and more so in terms of the tight ends that were still on the board. For me, this is a completely massive reach. And I mean, what are you doing for the Bengals? You gave, Eifert a 1-year deal, hoping that he can, stay healthy and prove to be like a legitimate, like top 5 tight end when all cylinders are going. Him and Andy Dalton are firing. And you go in and use a 2nd round pick on a reach at tight end. Wasn't a good look there for the Bengals. Moving to the AFC South. Starting with the Houston Texans. Best pick for me is Max Sharping in the 2nd round. I've already talked about him in depth, but I think he was one of the most underrated offensive linemen. For a team that desperately needed O-linemen, I love that pick. Worst pick, we're going Cullen Gillespie in the 7th round, running back. Never heard of him. So, Moving on to the Indianapolis Colts, best pick for me is Rocky Sin in the 2nd round. He's a great fit for that secondary. That's just a bunch of dogs. They have no elite corner, but for what they're trying to build there, I think Yasin fits that mold exactly. Worst pick for me is EJ Speed, the linebacker they selected in the 5th round. Again, who? Never heard of that guy in my life. Going to the Tennessee Titans, best pick was A.J. Brown in the 2nd round. I think he has the upside to really, really form a nice wide receiver core with Corey Davis and emerge as a safety net for Marcus Mariota. The worst pick, there wasn't really any bad picks for the Titans, so if I had to find one, it would be Nate Davis in the 3rd round, the guard from Charlotte. Just a little bit of an overreach from where I had my value on him. I thought more so he's going to be a 5th round pick. And finishing up with the Jacksonville Jaguars in the division, best pick is Jawan Taylor. They got him in the 2nd round just because so many people thought Jawan Taylor before this knee injury came to light was going to be a 1st round pick, and the Jags would take him at pick 7. The fact that he was still sitting there on the swing of things in the 2nd round, kudos for the Jags. Worst pick, Quincy Williams, who is Quinton Williams' brother from like Murray State or something, some school no one's ever heard of. Who? You got him in the 3rd round. I'm telling you right now, I guarantee you probably could have got him in like the 6th round, even if there's a little bit of hype that not a lot of people knew about. Unbelievable reach here for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Finishing up in the AFC, we have the West, and we're looking at the Kansas City Chiefs. Best value pick for me is Juan Thornhill, 2nd round, just almost a 3rd rounder out of Virginia. I think it's going to be very, very interesting how they get him and Tyrann Mathieu on the field at the same time. Worst pick is Rashad Fenton, the corner in the 6th round. Didn't even have a draftable grade on him. Looking at the LA Chargers, best pick was Nasir Adderley in the 2nd round. Safety slipped. Once again, proving that it's one of the most undervalued positions in the league. Nasir Adderley's going to an exceptional defensive secondary there in L.A. Worst pick for me was the reach to get Trey Pipkins, the tackle from Sioux Falls, considering the tackles that were still on the board. A little bit of a reach. Looking at the Denver Broncos, best pick for me was Drew Lock in the 2nd round, considering it's literally the exact same thing the Jacksonville Jaguars. Drew Lock was projected to be the 1st pick at pick 10 for the Broncos. The fact that they could just sit and wait, not even trade up and get him in the 2nd round is nice value for a guy that clearly fits the prototype of what John Elway wants in a QB. And the worst pick here is Juwan Winfrey, the wide receiver from Colorado in the 6th round, given some of the wide receivers that slipped beyond him and even into undrafted free agency, a little bit of a head scratcher there. Finishing up with the Raiders, the best pick I like is Foster Moreau in the 4th round, the tight end out of LSU. I will say right now, I would not be surprised to see before the end of next year, Moreau emerge as the starting tight end there for the Oakland Raiders. And the worst pick, there wasn't really any worst pick. I guess I just had to look in terms of value. Getting Clelin Ferrell at pick 4, I feel like if he was the guy that they thought was the next best edge rusher, you probably could have got him, in the teens. You probably could have traded down and added more draft capital. But ultimately, no real bad pick here for the Raiders, and we're kind of stretching to put Ferrell there. All right, moving into the NFC, we'll start in the NFC East. First up, we have the Philadelphia Eagles. Best pick is Andre Dillard. They got him at pick 22 in the first round. Obviously, my initial live reaction wasn't the best, but the fact that there could be a potential shot that he plays guard this year, I just want him to play. If there's a way that he can find himself onto the field, I'm going to like this move way more than I did when I just saw him as he's not going to play at all this year. He's going to be Jason Peters' replacement and might only play if Peters gets hurt. But the fact if they can get him at guard this year at some point, maybe left guard, I'm going to be very happy with this pick. The worst pick for the Philadelphia Eagles was Sharif Miller in the 4th round. Not so much the player. I think Sharif Miller is a safe edge rusher rotational pick, but more so the Philadelphia Eagles need a linebacker. They needed a safety. There were some good safeties, good linebackers still on the board there at pick 36, and they went defensive end to bring in a defensive end 5. I didn't really agree with the position they addressed. Looking at the Dallas Cowboys, their best pick for me, Joe Jackson in the 5th round out of Miami. I think he's going to be a very nice part of a defensive line rotation. The worst pick was actually their first selection, way in the 2nd round, is Tristan Hill, the defensive lineman from UCF. A lot of people had reports that he had some off-the-field attitude issues, but I mean, kind of fits to what Jerry Jones wants in a defensive player. But in terms of a 2nd round grade, I more so had an early 4th round grade on him. So in terms of looking at their picks, where I personally had their biggest reach was actually their first selection in the draft in Tristan Hill. Looking at the New York Giants, their best pick for me was Dexter Lawrence at pick 17 in the 1st round. I think he's going to start day 1. In that Snacks Harrison mold, it's going to free up Dalvin Tomlinson and BJ Hill to be at the defensive ends there. I think it's a nice young front for the Giants. Worst pick easily is going to be Daniel Jones at pick 6. Now, I've come out and said, a lot of people, if you're a fan of the NFC East teams that aren't the Giants, are absolutely ripping this pick to shreds. While it's really bad in terms of value, there's no way in hell Daniel Jones should have went top 10. In terms of a weak quarterback class, I think, he's as good a shot as any of developing into something. Do I think the Giants will be able to develop? That's another story. I don't think it is the case. The whole, he's going to sit 3 years is like what Dave Gettleman's coming out and saying. I love you, Mr. Dave Gettleman. But getting Daniel Jones at pick 6, that is a huge reach. I think that's just even more proof that Gettleman is a horrendous general manager. And finishing up in the division with the Redskins, who had an exceptional draft. Their best pick, take your shot, but I'm going to go with Dwayne Haskins, sitting and getting him at pick 15. In my opinion, the best quarterback in a weak QB class. Can he play right away? That's a different story, but in terms of value, I think it was a great job for the Redskins staying put and not trading up. Worst pick is Wes Martin in the 4th round. Didn't even have him as a player in my 400-player scouting guide, so especially getting those in the 4th round, yeah, I'm gonna pledge ignorance on this pick and just say, what are you thinking there, Dan Snyder? Moving to the NFC North, we'll start with the Green Bay Packers. Their best pick for me was Jay Sternberger in the 3rd round. I think outside of Hockenson and Fant, when you get into the tier 2 tight ends of Irv Smith, then you throw in Jay Sternberger, maybe Foster Moreau. I think that's a great value there for the Packers. And while they didn't get the tight end that many people in the fan base wanted in Hockenson or Fant, I think a guy like Jay Sternberger has a lot of upside. I also really did like, honorable mention, Darnell Savage in the 1st round. The worst pick for me, though, is Rashawn Gary at pick 12. Now, from an athletic standpoint, from an upside standpoint, is he worthy of a top 15-ish pick? Maybe, most likely. But given the limited production at Michigan, and also this arm injury, we don't know when he's going to be able to play. Just a little bit of a head scratcher there for the Packers. Not so much because he can play. He's a scheme fit for that 3-4. It's just, are you really going to get a guy at 12 that might miss significant time as a rookie? A little bit of a head scratcher for a team that I feel like they want to win now. And they probably could have at least, spent this pick somewhere else to get an impact playmaker right away. But if he can be ready for opening training camp, ultimately, Green Bay Packers didn't really have any bad picks. I'm kind of stretching this one a little bit just because of the injury to Gary. Going to the Minnesota Vikings, the best pick is Garrett Bradbury, who they selected in the 1st round at pick 18. I mocked him to him. It makes sense because you're going to get 2 spots better on the offensive line because you could slide Elflein out to guard, and Garrett Bradbury is pretty much Jason Kelsey 2.0. Worst pick is Austin Cutting. You draft a long snapper in the 7th round. You're still drafting a long snapper. Come on. Look at the Detroit Lions. Best value picks, Amani Oruwariye in the 5th round. A lot of people, myself included, thought he could sneak into the 1st. Ultimately, I thought he was a 2nd round grade corner. They got him in the 5th. This was a legitimate shot. He could emerge as a starting cornerback next to Darius Slay next year. Worst pick for the Lions is Jelani Tavai, the linebacker from Hawaii, who they selected in the 2nd round. I thought he was a decent linebacker. I actually did a little bit of a scouting report on him 2 years ago when I was making my draft classes. Yes, I'm a little bit of a nerd when it comes to that, but he definitely had draftable traits. I more so thought he was going to be an early day 3 selection. Getting him in the 2nd round, unless this is some little Bill Belichick residue of finding that diamond in the rough that's going to be excellent in their defensive scheme, which could be the case. But if we're just trying to look more so at reaches and where the worst value was for the Lions, I think Tavai in the 2nd is that. Then finishing up the division for the Chicago Bears, best pick for me was David Montgomery in the 3rd round. a little bit more of a scheme fit for Matt Nagy's offense than Jordan Howard was. And the worst pick for the Bears is Duke Shelley, who they selected in the 6th round. Didn't even have a scouting report done for him. So pleading a little bit of ignorance. Moving to the NFC South, we'll start with the Carolina Panthers. Best pick for me was Brian Burns at pick 16 in the 1st round. I thought he was a legit top 10 talent. The fact that the Panthers didn't have to trade up and got a player at a big-time position of need was great value. Worst pick for me was Will Grier in the 3rd round. Now, I'm stretching it. I don't think the Panthers really had any bad picks. So the reason why we put Will Grier here is just because, given the amount of needs they still have, is getting a backup quarterback with one of their premier picks worth it? I mean, maybe if Cam Newton's not going to be available for a significant time early next year, yeah, I guess Will Grier is one of the more pro-ready quarterbacks in this class. But I'm just more so putting it here because I think for a 3rd round pick, maybe it could have been better spent on a, offensive lineman, corner, safety, someone that's secondary versus a backup QB. Moving to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, best pick for me was Devin White at pick 5. He's going to be an absolute game changer for that defense. We've gone in this already in depth. Love that pick for the Bucs. Worst pick is going to be Sean Bunting in the 2nd round. He got a little bit of hype. I think he's Central Michigan, right? Got a little bit of hype potentially sneak into the 2nd round. It's just more so for the Bucs. Their player allocation. They got corner in the 2nd round. They went corner in the 3rd round. And they spent a lot of investments in corners last year. They got Carlton Davis, high pick. MJ Stewart, high pick. You picked up the 5th-year option on Vernon Hargraves. So I get it's a new regime there, but I just feel like going corner in the 2nd round and then going corner in the 3rd round, one of those corners had to get a bad pick. I'm going to go slightly more with Sean Bunting. Looking at the New Orleans Saints, their best pick for me was Chauncey Gardner-Johnson in the 4th round. He was great at my number 1 safety in the class, and he slipped to the 4th round. I'm still very upset that the Philadelphia Eagles weren't able to draft him. But my comparison to him was Malcolm Jenkins, and I hope he follows Malcolm Jenkins' path. Goes to the Saints, that gets undervalued there, and then it can come to Philly in free agency in a couple years. Worst pick for the Saints, I have is Saquon Hampton from Rutgers in the 6th round. I actually think that was a decent value. He's a good special teamer. But given the fact that you got Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, you already had some safeties in place, maybe they could have been better spent this pick at a more position of need, maybe get more beef on the offensive line. Maybe you could look at somewhere in the front 7 versus bringing in another safety to that roster. But ultimately, not a lot of bad picks for the Saints, if any. Then finishing up with the Atlanta Falcons in the division, best pick for me is Chris Lindstrom at pick 14 in the 1st round. Very, very safe pick. He's going to help solidify that right-hand side of the offensive line. Worst pick is kind of a double-edged sword because I like the player, just don't necessarily agree where they drafted him, and that's Caleb McGarry, the tackle from Washington. I think it was paramount, though, that the Falcons did solidify that right-hand side of their offensive line. I just don't know if I would trade up more assets to get in the 1st round to get Caleb McGarry. If they would have been able to sit there and wait for him to slip to him in the 2nd round, I think that would have been better value. Then finishing out the video in the NFC West, we'll start with the 49ers. Their best pick is Nick Bosa. They got debatably the best, if not the safest player in the draft at pick 2 at a big-time position of need. The worst pick for me was getting Mitch Wishnowsky, the best punter in the draft, but in the 4th round, come on. No special teamer should be picked before the 5th. Looking at the Seattle Seahawks, best pick for me is DK Metcalf, getting him in the tail end of the 2nd round, almost a 3rd round pick at pick 32. Really, really good value given the fact that there's a lot of uncertainty over Doug Baldwin. And if there's one wide receiver that can, develop and, they've done a good job developing young wide receivers in Seattle. But if there's one wide receiver that, given his current skill set, is going to most help Russell Wilson, I think you could argue that DK Metcalf more so than anyone else off those play actions is going to be a beast there in Seattle. Worst pick for the Seahawks was LJ Collier in the 1st round at pick 29. Thought that was a reach. I had like a late 2nd, early 3rd round grade on Collier. Them getting him in the 1st round is pretty much your classic Seattle Seahawk reach in the 1st round that we've become known and accustomed to over the last couple years. But still, really good draft from the Seattle Seahawks. Then looking at the LA Rams, their best pick for me was David Long, the corner out of Michigan in the 3rd round. Would not be surprised by season's end to have him be a starter at some point. Worst pick for them was Greg Gaines, the defensive lineman from Washington. I think I understand the pick because he probably can come in and contend. He's a safe pick for that nose tackle spot that was left vacant from Ndamukong Suh. Just don't necessarily agree with the 4th round grade. I like Greg Gaines, but he's very, very one-dimensional, very limited. I thought more so he'd be a late day 3 pick, not an early day 3 pick. And then finishing up with the Arizona Cardinals, the best pick for me was Hakeem Butler in the 4th round. Just, height, weight, speed freak. Definitely needs to develop, definitely needs to shore up the drops that he's had. But for a team like Arizona, the fact that they're going to have Hakeem Butler, Christian Kirk, Larry Fitzgerald for a year or two, Andy Isabella, that's a nice young wide receiver core, getting plenty of weapons for the man that I'm about to say was their worst pick, and that was Kyler Murray at pick number 1. It just comes down to the fact that they shot themselves in the foot with the Josh Rosen trade. They would have traded him sooner. They would have got a lot more value, in my opinion, and they knew all along that Kyler Murray was going to be their pick, and they just They were too overconfident. They were too arrogant into the fact that they could draft Kyler and still get a lot of value for Josh Rosen. And instead, I mean, I like that he went to the Dolphins because maybe it's something that can take a stab at the Patriots being so dominant. But the player itself, it makes sense now. Now that the Rosen's gone, you look at the roster, you're kind of intrigued. Can Kyler Murray develop into the next Russell Wilson? But just at the time of this pick happening, it was just absolute shambles, and I'm very, very shocked that a front office actually handcuffed and handicapped themselves so much on the trade market by drafting Kyler Murray while Josh Rosen was still on the roster. But ultimately, not a bad draft for the Arizona Cardinals, and I would like to think I'm not overly negative about this year's draft class. I think almost every team did a pretty good job. There's a couple mock drafts that are a little bit head-scratching for me. If you watched my grades video, I know I kind of went in a little bit on the Houston Texans draft. I thought the Jaguars, it was a little bit weird. The Cowboys, who I actually think I gave the best draft class to last year, I didn't really like what they did this year, which I guess at the end of the day is pretty good for me being an Eagles fan. But want to hear what you guys think. Do you guys agree or disagree? Give me some of your bold takes for who the best and worst pick was across all of the league in the comment section below. That does it for me today, guys. Thank you for watching, and until next time, it's C4 saying like, subscribe, all that good shit, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace out.